Today's conversation will be among 6 extraordinary teachers who've been assembled by 2 of our ArtPlace colleagues, Maura Cuffie and Jamie Hand. My dad, whose early career was at Highlights for Children, a magazine from doctors' waiting rooms, has been dipping into some of our sessions this week, and I found myself thinking back to my own childhood and the books that used to sit in my bedroom. In particular, I'm thinking of Shel Silverstein, and many of us know Where the Sidewalk Ends, which begins, "There is a place where the sidewalk ends and before the street begins. And there the grass grows soft and white. And there the sun burns crimson bright. And there the moonbird rests from his flight to cool in the peppermint wind." And when I think of the work that Maura and Jamie have done at ArtPlace, I think of that particular place where the sidewalk ends before the street begins. Both Maura and Jamie have worked to build sidewalks for groups of us to travel together. Maura with the 5 assemblies she's been supporting, and Jamie, the 10 sets of artists, community developers, and intermediaries that she and Don Sherman have been bringing together. Jamie and Maura have walked them to the ends of those sidewalks as far as they could go together. And they've worked to make sure that each of those people has what they need as they leave them in that grass that grows soft and white, what they need to cross the street and keep walking, and what they need to stay still and rest in that peppermint wind. So please join me in welcoming Maura and Jamie along with 6 of their fellow travelers. Maura and Jamie, the Zoom is yours.
Wow. Oh, hello. Thank you so much, Jamie Bennett. What a generous introduction. Hey, Jamie Hand. We're here. It's Thursday, day 4 of the summit. Hi to all of you in this virtual room. I'm dialing in from the Flatbush neighborhood of Brooklyn, USA, where I call it the Black diaspora comes to celebrate. I love this place so much. And that being said, it's really the land of the Lenape peoples. I joined ArtPlace 2 years ago, almost exactly. Yes, I'm looking at Jamie Hand for confirmation. Almost exactly 2 years ago, to design and oversee what we now refer to as local control, local fields. At that time, the ArtPlace team was asking itself, how do we best steward our funds to support the field long after we've gone? One of the answers was, well, maybe we shouldn't be the ones making that decision, right? And so in 5 geographies, we convened assemblies of about 30 folks in the gorgeous city of Philadelphia, the lovely state of Massachusetts, the 6th state region of Central Appalachia. If you're from Central Appalachia, shout outs to y'all. The San Joaquin Valley of California, and a complex, nuanced, also gorgeous region comprising of Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and 23 and many more Native nations. These assemblies represented, I call it the richness and complexity of the field, right? People who are artists, who are activists, who are planners, who do strategy, who never do strategy, who are under 30, over 70, who are queer, who are cis, who are gender nonconforming, who are Black, who are Indigenous. I'd say all who have a big penchant for equity and really strong opinions for how to really do it. Each assembly was asked to figure out how to utilize a significant pool of funds ranging from $1.45 to $4.5 million, depending on that geography. Over many, many months, and with the support of expert process facilitators, they built their own visions, determined their own decision-making structures, and assumed ownership of those funds in the name of creative placekeeping, tending, knowing in their cherished geographies. So local control, local fields is an attempt to disrupt power, to cede control, and vest it in the people and places who have always, already, and will continue to do this work regardless of ArtPlace's existence. I'm sharing all this context because you're about to hear from, I think we have 17 folks, including the 6 respondents who have experienced ArtPlace through this lens, and obviously have a unique and important way to consider navigating power. Also people who Jamie Hand has built a strong relationship with. So, hey, Jamie Hand.
Hey, Maura, thank you. I've learned so much from you and how you've led the assembly work in such a generous and values-driven way. Big hello to everyone else here at today's summit. I'm calling in from South Jersey, the unceded sovereign lands of the Lenni Lenape people. who in the warmer seasons fish the ocean and the bay that I get to turn to for peace and solace these days. As Jamie Bennett mentioned, I'm the Director of Research Strategies, where since 2014, I've had the privilege and challenge of leading alongside Danya Sherman what we call the Translating Outcomes work, also known as our cross-sector knowledge and work building. At its simplest, this work has been a series of deep dives into 10 different industries or disciplines within the community development field: housing, safety, immigration, transportation, and the like. Segmented approach in order to understand in greater nuance how arts and culture connects up to those different systems, sometimes aligning with them, other times pushing them to evolve. We've also done this so that we can develop some shared language and build communities of practice in each of those sectors. I can't tell you how happy it makes me to see so many affinity groups growing out of this work. Many of you know this work from its more public-facing outputs: a field scan, which is a published report in each sector, or a working group, which is a cross-disciplinary convening of artists, researchers, policymakers, community members, and other thought leaders and practitioners with deep wisdom and experience in a given sector. The whole point of these working groups was to lean on the knowledge and perspective of the field, to share decision-making and to co-create resources not for, but with the field. So, Maura and I are here with you today as colleagues who, in addition to being total process nerds, have designed and led programs that are explicitly participatory. We understand the power of the platform that ArtPlace represents, and we take very seriously the immense responsibility of stewarding resources locally, regionally, and nationally, whether those are literal dollars, as in the case of Maura's work, or hard-won knowledge in the case of the cross-sector work. So we both turned almost instinctively to the field, to you all, to the people who are doing the work on the ground in communities. Both of our programs have shared a commitment to centering the voices of practitioners and to building relationships with the people and the partners who are going to keep at it long after ArtPlace's sunset. Sounds lovely, right? What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing. That's the whole plenary. Thanks so much. Just kidding. No, but what could go wrong? I mean, it's super messy, right? Like if you joined us on Monday, you heard our colleagues Liz and Eric point out that creative placemaking is far from neutral. We use beautiful words and we lead with heart-centered intentions, and yet we're still caught up, if not entirely complicit, in lots of those isms that we were trying to thwart, right? Racism, ableism, classism, extractive capitalism, transphobia, just to name a few. And the we here I'm referencing is the web of all of us, like me, you, philanthropy, intermediaries, practitioners, the whole web of folks who are involved in this field of creative placekeeping. Navigating power and how it's wielded, how it's shared, at its worst exploited, can't be an afterthought. It must be tended to and understood along the way if we're really going to move towards that vision of beloved community. You'll see in the next conversations, we have this hypothesis that there are potentially 3 ingredients to navigating power. Are there more? For sure, but we're going to start here. We think they include building trust. So you'll see folks get into that subject matter, repairing harm while hoping to restore love, and then collective decision making. I'd say a hallmark of what Jamie Hand and I have attempted to move through our separate and processes.
So yeah, clearly Maura and I could keep talking about this all day. We've had fun actually preparing for this plenary, but the whole point is to turn it over to people who can dive into these new topics far better than we can.
Yeah, and the footnote on the people who are about to hear from, it felt really important to remind folks these are real people who are, in physical, scary proximity to recent COVID hotspots. I imagine many of you who are dialing in are as well. Folks who perhaps got home a few hours ago, having protested in West Philly, yet another disgusting display of state-sanctioned murder of Black people, who have been driving hours from their haulers to fight for justice for Breonna Taylor. So like Zoom feels fake some days, and I just wanted to footnote that yes, Zoom is fake and this is real, right? And the people here are speaking to that realness.
So what you're about to witness is what Maura and I also lovingly refer to as a chorus of voices. And this is an intentional signaling of the countless brilliant leaders in this field who hold power of their own. You'll see this chorus of voices in a combination of recorded reflections and live conversations. They are all people that have been in relationship with ArtPlace and in relationship with each other. We'll first play a video montage of folks reflecting on one of the 3 themes that Maura just introduced, and then you'll hear an incredible pair of humans respond. Last but not least, we've encouraged everyone to be super honest and vulnerable. So if something resonates, please don't hesitate to show your love in the chat. And with that, let's turn to the first video.
I think trust is critical because it allows us to embrace vulnerabilities, strengths, weaknesses. It puts us in positions that historically a lot of us might not have felt safe in. It creates so many different opportunities for people, and I think that it would help us collectively work towards the greater good when there's trust put in as the centerpiece.
Showing up is key, and then active listening, listen, and then also your actions have to reflect what was said, what was communicated. For the first year, I showed up almost every week, right? And so that says something, because without trust, it's either no trust or indifference. No trust, of course, is not good. But indifference is kind of like this invitation to say no, right? You could pass on something if you're indifferent. That's not good.
We build trust by giving up control, by leaning into discomfort, by being willing to be vulnerable, to open ourselves, to be transparent about our motives, about what we want, to be willing to listen. We build trust by engaging in this beautiful, messy, creative, terribly difficult collaborative process.
Trust is critical. What if I didn't trust the water to hold me? I would drown.
Hello, everyone. I'm Radhika Fox with the U.S. Water Alliance, and what beautiful videos. Thank you, ArtPlace America. So it's my honor to introduce a friend and collaborator, Shanai Matteson with the Water Bar. And, you know, if I had 3 words that I would use to describe who Shanai is, she's a mother, she is a water warrior, and she's an activist. I first met Shanai in 2017 at the U.S. Water Alliance's One Water Summit. The One Water Summit, for those who are not in the water world, it's a national conference, and we are trying to bring together all who have a stake in our nation's water future, whether it's the safety of the water that our children are drinking and bathing in, whether it's climate resilience, all of the ways that water touches our lives. We're trying to work together to find solutions. And it was actually Jamie Hand that had introduced me to Shanai and the incredible work that she was doing around Water Bar to help people engage in different ways and connect in different ways to their water and to the solutions that we need to be advancing. And I will say, you know, for those who don't know the water sector, it is older, it's white, and it's very male. And the thought of bringing in artists and culture bearers into what has been a very technocratic audience, it took a leap of faith. But I trusted Jamie Hand, and I trusted the partnership that she and Shanai had. So Shanai, it's great to be with you and to share our journey that we've had together in this work.
Thanks, Radhika, and thank you, Jamie, and thank you, everyone. It's so great to be here with you all in this virtual space. Radhika mentioned that we first met at the One Water Summit in New Orleans, and I have to admit I was a little bit surprised when the invitation came to join that conference, a national conference of water sector workers. And you know, I'd worked as an artist with Water Bar and Public Studio and other collaborators for a number of years, working with engineers, working with research scientists, community organizers. We're kind of like a little hub in the middle of a wheel of lots of different partners. And so I know the audience that Radhika talked about, and I know the challenges of working with folks who maybe don't see the world in the same way that we do as artists, or have very different languages, different styles and ways of working. And when I got there, to see Radhika from across the room just navigating with such grace through all of these different types of conversations was really inspiring, and how warm and welcoming the Water Alliance was, and then the willingness to muck in to this difficult work together. Yeah.
No, please. No, go. Awkward Zoom moment.
I was just going to talk a little bit how, as an artist and an organizer, that trust building is so critical. As an artist, I have to trust myself. I have to trust my creative vision. As an artist organizer, I'm working between a community of artists who all have very different practices, who are coming from very different backgrounds, who've experienced injustice in the work that they've done and in the organizations they partner with. So it really does take nourishing that trust to be able to work between those different areas. And that's something that I know you can relate to in your work with the Water Alliance.
Yeah, and the sad reality in this country is that we are at an all-time low when it comes to just trust in government and trust in our water systems. I think we, as a water sector, have broken trust in many respects. If you think about things like the Flint water crisis and the ways in which a whole generation of Black children were essentially poisoned and their futures are at risk. And so, the way that we got to working with artists like Shanai is that we have to figure out new ways to relate to people, new ways to convey the complexity of the challenges that we face in the water sector, and ways to repair the broken promises that we have made. And that was really our opening to understanding how arts and culture and artists and culture bearers, when they're centered in the solutions we're advancing, can do that. And Shanai, I think that Water Bar and what you're doing is such an amazing example of how to rebuild, repair trust, and reframe solutions. You want to talk a little bit about how you work?
Yeah, so Water Bar is a project that I've worked on collaboratively with too many other artists and organizations to really mention. So I think of it more as a space that I'm helping to create and hold with many, many others. And one of the things that's really important is that to offer someone a glass of water, they really have to trust that what you're offering to them is safe. There's a lot of trust that comes into just putting something into your body, and we use that experience, that shared experience, to rebuild trust and to really have those storytelling moments where people can share, like Radhika said, the ways that the water systems and the political systems and the land use and all the things that shape the way that water is treated in this land, the way that is experienced by different people. We're trying to open up that space, and we bring engineers and we bring folks who work in those sectors into the space, but it's really led by artists and by storytelling. And I have to trust my community to bring themselves into that space, and I have to create that shared trust in order to that we can be in that together.
Yeah, and Shanai, one thing that you said that is a reflection I have of how we have partnered together is how we each have circles of trust, right? In our networks, the circle of artists and culture bearers that you work with, the water sector engineers and others that I work with, and that together we were able to create these sort of concentric circles of trust between these two worlds that often don't meet, and the role of kind of safe and productive spaces to bring different folks together. So one thing that Shanai did with ArtPlace America is, for the last 2 years, we've had artists and an arts and culture delegation at our national conferences, and creating those spaces where the artists were together as a group, but also engaging with this whole new different world, I think has been really effective, and lots of partnerships have come from that.
Yeah, and that was really an experience to help organize that delegation with the U.S. Water Alliance and ArtPlace. One of the things I realized about that trust that I need to nourish and hold with my community of artists and the communities that they are all coming from is that many have had really challenging experiences attending professional conferences or working with agencies and organizations. They have to think about the economic disparities that artists and their communities are often facing, the professional languages that can be really exclusionary. So going together as a delegation, being able to support one another, we met as artists ahead of time to define what it was we wanted to experience from that conference, how we could support each other. And then during that conference, we had a water bar set up, and it became a kind of place for the artists to come and process the really sometimes difficult time they were having never been in a room with engineers and policymakers talking about water, something that's very sacred and very important to so many of us in this really detached way. So it became this way for us to really think about and work through where that work as artists lives in that space.
And I think also another piece of trust is to be able to share with each other when things aren't going right. And one thing I really appreciated about you is you shared with me hard feedback that artists that had come into the sort of US Water Alliance space had felt or experienced so that we could know and we could change our culture. And one of the things I'm really excited about is really because of the work with you and with ArtPlace, we've launched this Arts and Culture Accelerator where we're now working with an artist in residence, Benny Starr, who has been engaged in ArtPlace Summit over the last couple of days, as well as really trying to encourage utilities to build those arts partnerships. So I want to thank you for all the learning and for the trust you have placed in us in choosing to partner.
Yeah, and I had a chance to hear Benny in a small group conversation yesterday and was reminded of how important it is to remember that water is always raced and classed. The relationships we have with water say so much about our relationships with power. And so being able to build trust in those relationships is not just about making collaborations and projects work well. It's actually about how we remake these systems in a way that more people can live. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and thanks to all the artists who are going to be part of that work.
And I think we have about 30 seconds. So I think Shanai and I also want to do a call to all the artists in the Zoom room with us. Water, we face unprecedented challenges, unprecedented complexity as it relates to race, poverty, climate, and water. And look to water, be like water, join us in utilizing arts and culture to transform the water sector.
Yeah, and along those same lines, I often return to water both as a metaphor and a material because of that relational thing I was talking about. And I've come to this phrase that the people are a river. And that to me really reminds me that we are a river and rivers are powerful. Water is powerful. So if we can think and act in that way, I think that will serve the future we want to see. Thanks.
Thank you.
Harm in its many forms, everything from small misunderstandings to violence, is always a possibility in any type of collaborative community project. I've learned a lot from the practice of transformative justice, especially from Mia Mingus, to think about harm along the way while it's still small and manageable. So I've been really thinking about what are tools of loving accountability, of repair, of reconnection that are needed to be coupled with the tools of co-creation, of radical imagination in projects.
The way that I navigate processes and partnerships with challenging dynamics is to remind myself and others that we are human beings. So much like the naturalist reminded the eagle who thought it was a chicken about who it really was, it's important that any partnership or process exude what's most important to humanity, and that's to be acknowledged, appreciated, respected, understood, and above all else, loved. And if that's our North Star, everything will work out as it should.
We embrace restorative justice and deep listening practices when those who have caused harm are open to these processes. But so often the burden of this work falls upon the shoulders of communities where harm is being received. In these instances, when healthy relationships are no longer possible, we step away with love, focus on healing, and embodying, articulating, and practicing what liberated relationships look like.
My motto is do everything with honesty, integrity, clarity of intent, and consent.
Hi, we're here. We are going to introduce each other, but first, I just want to say how excited I am that, like, after listening to that last conversation, right, which really focused on the relationship between the individual and systems, right? In this case, the water system and everything around that you and I, TIANNA, we get to talk about us, right? We get to talk about complicated people of color. We get to talk about like our complex stories and narratives. We get to talk about complex practitioners of color and like our deep relationships with one another. And how harm and healing can and can't happen in philanthropical processes and just in general. But first, I'm going to introduce you before we dive into that. I know you as someone who was part of the San Joaquin Valley assembly that I facilitated. I know you as just generally an awesome youth leader. I know you as an artist, as an organizer, as a mycelium networker. I just came up with that one. I feel pretty good about it, but it feels right to me. I know you as an expansive thinker, and I also know you as also a facilitator and a consultant who is ready to take on clients for folks out there watching from home. So
yes. Thank you, Daniel. This is all true. I'm so grateful to be here.
So yeah, I mean, are you good to just like dive into it? Do you just want to do the thing?
Let's dive in.
Yeah, totally. So I'm really interested to talk about what your experience in the San Joaquin Valley Assembly was like, really particularly what your experience and relationship was with the way that power and its history worked in the room. Thinking about, right, like we were in a room with majority folks of color and a diverse like array of experiences even within that, yeah. And so what was your experience with power and its history like?
Yeah, I think that disclaiming and grounding us in the reality, I'm going to go back to water. We're going to end with water here, but thinking about the reality that we work in systems that are inherently set up for us to fail, right? And they do that through inspiring disconnection, through fear, right? So my experience in the assembly was very similar to my experience living in the Central Valley in my body with my complexities, right? And the nuance. So in the ways I've shown up, that has looked mostly like an environmental justice organizer, as a facilitator, and as an experiential artist. I come into a space and I think, what am I trying to help people to feel? What am I trying to pull up? And so I think my experience in the assembly was almost as though I was put back into the reality of the harms I've lived through the Central Valley, which is knowing that people are unfamiliar with queerness, right? And my queerness is centered around loving, right? We think of water. It's watering seeds and returning for harvest regardless of what is going to come. It's choosing to tend to what work is needing to be done and doing it with love and joy and compassionate understanding. And so I think my experience being in this space and coming from that foundation with among many other cultural and identity-based foundations, I was faced with the reality that for us to undo harm, we have to live into love, because we have to essentially face the things about ourselves that we're taught to be uncomfortable about while accepting someone where they're at, which might not feel good. So I felt like the whole entire experience was a beautiful reminder of doing the work that's needed. It's not cute, it's not comfortable, and it's definitely not it's not easy, but it's like farming. It's like water. It's like you have to continue to water, you have to continue to show up, and you have to continue to edify and support one another. And sometimes that doesn't feel good, but we're all connected. So it's essentially, as I nourish another, they're nourishing me and vice versa. So that's what I experienced.
That's lovely. I mean, I really appreciate getting to hear that, just in part because like those spaces, my experience of the space was it was such a complicated one, right? Like so many of the folks in the room, even if they hadn't met each other, because they existed in an ecosystem together, right? Like because they were all fed by the same water systems, had like complicated pre-existing relationships because they had heard about each other's organizations or work, but they had never really, because some people, you know, had access to more social capital or had access to literally more financial capital. These people have more experience and legacies that they could pull on than other folks. And yet at the same time, like there's all of this complicated nature around like, okay, you've got folks who are Black immigrants, you've got folks who are, you know, of Japanese descent who like have whose families have farmed in the area for a long time. You've got Latinx and Indigenous, like all of these complicated relationships where nobody knows each other perfectly already. And so everybody's kind of like making mistakes while also this like larger ecosystem of being like, and you only have so many months to actually get the work done in. Like be spacious, do the work, make these connections, heal with each other, do everything you need to do. And yet at the same time, like you only have 6 months to do it in. Good luck.
Yeah. I mean, bringing that up, getting to the nitty gritty of it, I mean, it was very difficult when you have cis men. There were cis men that would speak down to me and call me like honey or sweetie, you know, or there were people who had really great strategies that were based on business and based on thought. And there are a lot of things that are up here where money and time is. And when you are on the front lines, grassroots, there's not much money or time, but you do what you can. So I felt like there's lots of division that was happening because people were going off into their theory and off into their praxis. And folks on the ground were like, we just need a house where the grandmas can watch the babies so we can get some stuff done in our homes and our hearts. And then other people were like, well, we want to put money here and do this and create new programs. And so there was a definite pool between the underground, the grassroots, and then those who have degrees and access and power. So it was definitely felt, and it wasn't comfortable. I think what I'm speaking to is the reality that I think we landed where we did because we couldn't teach every single thing about one another, right? No one could be fully understood, but we made clear our values. And I think your process, you and Pato, aligning us around our values helped us to understand, oh, these folks who have money and power and access are like, I value this, but they don't know how to embody these values because they're not forced to live in this reality. And we have no idea what they're doing because we're not understanding what they're saying because of language accessibility and time. We have no clue what they're doing. So I thought it was a beautiful reckoning. And I thought it was great how you and Pato and Maura brought us all together to have more autonomy in our creative process and how we're student funds. So like, all that to say, yeah.
Well, I mean, to sort of wrap it up, right, in the last few minutes that we've got, I'm wondering, right, what I'm hearing is there are all of these deep relationships. And so I'm wondering a little bit, like, what do you feel like is necessary in order for a healing process to begin by all of these communities that have been deeply affected by white supremacy, by capitalism, by extractive economies, by all of these things, right? Like we're all out here saying we're doing the work, trying to work together. Everybody does have good ideas, but like we're not in right relationship fully yet. What do you think needs to happen to start that process?
What needs to happen is we need to begin to accept largely as a nation, but as a people, that the same way we look at economy, right, the dealings of home, we have to do the same for our inner parts, right? What are the resources I have within myself? Maybe I can't be in a heated conversation because I'm triggered and I don't want to talk to this rich white person who doesn't know me. But you know what I could do? I could cook dinner for this group of people, or I could go home and mind my business and come back when it's time for me to speak, right? Or perhaps it's, wait, maybe it doesn't make sense for me to be in the street in this moment. Maybe it makes sense for me to mentor other people to share all my skills because I have a lot of privilege and experience and education. So I think the solution is going to be people accepting the same way we're scaling markets and we're doing stuff externally and foundations come with solutions. the solutions are within us. The solutions are within us. So we need to spend more time focusing on how are we going to steward our inner resources, our wisdom, what we know, our spirituality, our traumas. There's a lot of wisdom and power that comes from that. So how can we continue to move at the pace we must, but also listen to what's coming through and respect that and honor that and challenge the systems we're in? Because hierarchy creates disconnection. And the only way that we can actually change these systems is through reconnecting with ourselves to know what our truth is and what we're called to do and what our role is, and to step out of our egos and more into our bodies and back into the natural flow of things. And just closing that up, I think of it, a farmer, an uncle from the islands was telling me, specifically when he makes poi boards, he was saying, if I get in a groove while I'm on this board, I am stuck in that. And if I wanted to switch out of that groove, I have to sand it, do all this stuff, right? And it's similar in the systems we're in grooves. So how are we going to recognize the groove we're in? And as a collective, be like, we're in a groove, y'all. We didn't create this groove. We didn't get to pick what tree this came from. I don't know who treated this. How do we come together and work with what we have in this groove we're in that we don't benefit from? So those are my thoughts.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Yeah, thanks for sharing that wisdom, TIANNA. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Reflecting on challenges related to collective decision making. So how do we show up? Do we show up just to give and get, or do we show up to receive and listen? And then what do we bring to the space? Our baggage, our egos, our preconceived notions, our experiences. And then, how do we become comfortable with being uncomfortable? We seek after perfection, but do we respect the process enough? And then how do we build in trust and time to do that?
The cycle of nonviolent communication has taught me a lot in my creative placemaking practice. Taking the time to train myself to make unbiased observations and suspend my judgment about the places and people that I'm working in, working with. Taking the time to understand and really take in the feelings that are involved in an effort and the people in the community. Then assessing the needs in an honest and authentic way. And then that moves you into a place where you can negotiate and discuss the requests that are necessary to make the best project possible with the most benefit to the community.
One of the things I find rewarding about collective decision making is working together with a group of people who are invested in the outcomes to get to a result that none of you could have imagined on your own, that's informed by your experiences and commitment and maybe even more importantly, your ability to build trust and move past and through your own bias, and to be willing to do that. It's powerful.
Hey, Judy.
Hey, it's a very big honor to introduce you, Joe Tolliver Jr., Joe T. He's someone that's been helping us learn creative decision-making and collective work in our Central Appalachian Assembly. And currently, Joe works at two places, at Carpetbag Theater, which is a legendary Black theater in Knoxville, and a new organization called the People's Hub, where he's helping young visionaries that are working together to bring skills and talents to changing our world in the region and beyond. But I just wanted to hold up that Joe works at the intersection of art, culture, and social justice and spirituality. And we have needed all of those, and he has brought them to us in our assembly. And Joe teaches us that sometimes that working at those intersections can be as simple as just expecting the best from ourselves and from each other, and giving ourselves grace when we fall short of the glory, which we sometimes do, don't we, Joe? Joe always keeps us focused on the prize, which is advancing racial justice, economic equity, and finding love for ourselves and each other in our home communities.
Wow, I need to take you everywhere with me, Judy. But yeah, so mine will be a mixture of the formal and the informal. So Judy J, as I affectionately call Judy, is a resident of Louisville with deep roots in Appalachia from their work at Apple Shop. And they are a fundraiser, researcher, and co-producer of one of the most amazing documentaries I've ever seen, Stranger with a Camera, that explores creation and storytelling and the consequences of media making from a point of view that is political. And Judy is also the executive director of the Kentucky Foundation for Women that funds feminist art for social change in Kentucky. And one thing that I would love to let you all know is that I trust Judy with my life because throughout this process of the local control, local fields Appalachian Assembly, Judy became a person that I would rely on to have these hard conversations that I would then bring to the group. But first I had to just like let someone else hear and externalize. And Judy has always been that in the various things that we've been able to work on over the years. So this is my friend and homie, Judy J.
Thank you, Joe. I just wanted to start us out by saying that when we look at creating power in our Central Appalachian Assembly, we know we have to create new systems because the systems that we have aren't working for us and people, Black, brown, and poor people anywhere else either. And I wanted to give a shout out to the plenary yesterday on post-colonial economies, especially our rural friends there from Thunder Valley. I love you all, Thunder Valley. And I wanted to say that they really explained what colonialism is in America and how extractive economies are so harmful to not only our land but to our people, and how shaming of our people and shaming of our culture is part of colonialism that we understand, don't we? And so that's been a really, and racism that maintains our divisions, all of those are part of our region, part of ourselves. And they talked really eloquently in that plenary yesterday about the dominant narratives. And we talked about that too in our assembly, how those narratives, the national narratives that people read in the newspaper every day or see on the news every day, how they rob us of our self-respect, and they steal our agency, and they steal our hope. And so in Central Appalachia, national philanthropy has really been part of colonizing us, to be honest. And and they do that by forcing us to write applications that only talk about how poor and pitiful we are, and not all of our strengths and what our visions are, and also by funding big nonprofits and not believing in the power of community change. So because, as you know, Joe, so many national philanthropies have been colonial. At first, we didn't trust our Place America very much, to be honest. So, and then when we figured out that we could trust them, that they were really going to give us the funds and we were going to control them, many of us were actually horrified that then we would become funders, and we definitely didn't want to become that. And so our assembly had to struggle with many tensions and differences, and that's why we had to have those hard conversations, like at night in the bar. and yes, because our assembly has racial differences. We have social, just like California, social and economic differences, different opportunities for people to have a formal education and careers, and different ages. And so I just wanted to hear from you, because you were always an inspiration to me, and the lovingness and your grace and your power. You can give grace and still have big expectations and don't let us off the hook. So how did that make you feel, Joe?
Yeah, so one thing I will say that I appreciated about the process that Maura and our facilitation team put together is that they didn't assume like a neutral slate. And one of the things that helped me to vocalize what I was feeling in the room was when we all got to talk about the matrix of power that existed in the room and where we fit within it. Because I was there with funders, you know, who have funded past work and could potentially fund future work. And so I felt like, especially as a Black person who often feels erased from the Appalachian narrative, there already is an imbalance of power. And so I really appreciated just naming that on the front end. And I won't say that it was a magic bullet or magic solution or anything, but definitely just having that out front and in the open allowed, I feel, us to collectively decide how we were going to chart a way forward. And so, yeah, it was interesting in thinking about having to make decisions collectively, because a part of it is not only trusting each other, but also trusting the process that we were charting through together, and that we would have the wherewithal to make these decisions that got us to the North Star of liberated communities. And I would say that, yeah, that was a challenge, getting people to not only trust each other across those webs of power differentials, but also trusting the process that we would have the knowledge, because I feel like that ties back in to the history that you gave of people not expecting us to have the knowledge that we need, or seeing the value of us being knowledgeable about our own lives. And so I definitely feel like, thinking about collective decision making, that was a hurdle that had to be overcome.
Yeah, one thing I'm really proud that I think helped us is we decided to go to the field, to go to the artists and cultural workers that are already working in our region that haven't been recognized haven't been receiving funding or been recognized for their work at the community level. And that became our touchstone, and we wanted to give some money to those people to learn together with them, and I think that really helped us out. Do you feel like that was a good move for us to make?
I think so, because it got us beyond the people in the room. And so, yeah, I think it's easy in these kinds of processes where we have to make decisions together. It's hard to get beyond the people in the room and to keep in mind that it's not just me here as a participant, but I represent my communities. I represent the young people in the Stay Project. And so I feel like going out into the community and bringing those issues that they were facing into the room made me, I can't speak for everybody, but it definitely made me think that I'm not making these decisions just on behalf of Joe, the person, but it's me and all the people that I'm connected to that I'm bringing into the room that affected my thinking about what I was proposing and what I didn't want to support, because I think that was also important in terms of making collective decisions. And there were great times to stand in collective about what we didn't want. And I think that happened several times as well.
Right.
So Judy, can you talk about the results of our work? Because I think it's important for people to hear.
Right. Well, we have parts of 6 states, which was a problem itself. West Virginia is the only state that's wholly in that region. So we don't get a chance to talk to each other, and we didn't really know what was going to happen. But on Monday, we received 58 amazing applications from people of color, people that have not been funded before in all those 6 states to do good work, art and cultural work in their communities. There are co-ops, there are galleries, there are individual artists, there are new organizations. So we're going to be able to give them some seed funding in next week. And start learning with them. So I'm really I'm really excited about what we have going forward, but it's been hard.
But we made it. Great talking to you, Judy.
You too.
I had to like wipe my mascara off, Jamie Hand. I don't know about you. I like bought it last minute this morning because I wanted to be cute for all these people, and I regret it because I'm crying so much now.
Now you all know why we wanted to bring all of these folks on to talk about this stuff in a real way. I am so grateful to the vulnerability is not a sufficient word, but the honesty and the reality of what was shared today. We're going to keep it quick because I know we started a little bit late, but I'll drop in the Slack or in the chat everybody who contributed to the videos, so you can see their names again. Just want to extend so much gratitude to all of you, to Judy, to Joe, to Daniel, to Tianna, to Shanai, to Radhika, for being with us today and sharing your insights and wisdom. One of the things that I'm going to take away, I think it started in Shanai and Radhika's conversation and continued with some of Tianna's comments about the importance of creating spaces to do the trust building, to do the addressing of harm if it's occurred, when it's occurred, and this idea that we don't always choose those spaces and that we need to choose those spaces and make some safer ones. I think the groove is how Tianna referred to it too. So that's one of the things that I'm going to leave with. So thank you.
Yeah, and I echo everything Jamie said and everything everyone said. I learned so much from y'all, and I hope to continue to in the future. I'm sitting with a number of things, but especially right now, that we need to live into love. You all know me as a gushy person anyway, but come on, like, live into love. That feels really pertinent today of all days. I hope for all of you who tuned in that you also sit with all of these and munch on it and talk to your people about it as you consider your own practices and processes that you're developing or participating in, that you contend with power, that you share it, that you be critical, and that you take good care in all things that you do. So thank you again, and see you soon.
Thanks for being with us today.
And I don't know that I have anything to add, except I think that this is one of those moments that Zoom is at its best. For us to be able to eavesdrop, to overhear 19 different people in sort of clusters of intimate, honest conversation just feels like a gift. So as we're getting ready to get up and go on to our next thing, let's just take a minute to think of those 19 voices. Think of Holly and Alan and Betsy and Jennifer, thinking about the way they teed up that conversation with Radhika and Shanai, thinking about Teresa and David and Christina and Whit, thinking about the way Tianna and Daniel leaned into that conversation, thinking about Cass, Alberto, Denise, and then Judy and Joe, and especially Jamie and Maura, for knowing those folks, for listening to those folks, and for inviting us to eavesdrop on those conversations.